attempt number 3. I think we can hear me. Hopefully, we can hear AAA, and then even more hopefully, we can hear
Test.
the video, which I'm gonna just play immediately.
The Bible's been accused of being an outdated book of superstition, written by people who didn't.
And then I'm gonna pause it, and then hopefully this live one, whenever it catches up on YouTube, we'll have it, and I can hear it, and then we'll know for sure.
Yeah, it works.
All right, cool. Now, back to the idea of whenever you're ready. Apologize for the audio issues again. But when you're ready,
I'm ready, dog.
All right, hit and play.
The Bible's been accused of being an outdated book of superstition, written by people who didn't understand the scientific workings of the real world. Now, this accusation is patently false. Not only does the Bible not contain errors and
Pause it real quick?
superstitious.
Yeah.
So Phantom said he can hear it, but it's really quiet.
All right, I'm going to crank it.
All right. And let's restart it.
Okay.
Why are you doing that? I'll just
The
get some
Bible's been
commentary because I was
accused
going
of being an
to pause it
outdated
anyway.
book of superstition, written by people who didn't
He says
understand
that-
the scientific workings of the real world. Now,
I-
this accusation is patently false.
Me.
Not only does the Bible not contain errors and superstitious statements, but
How does that
it
sound,
contains
Phantom?
amazing scientific facts that were written down thousands of years before we in modern scientific times understood how important they were. I'm going to give you a list of 6 scientific facts that validate the Bible.
He says better.
Number
Cool.
1, blood being
All
the
right.
liquid.
All right, let's run it back.
Again, even though this one was super loud. Okay, fine. Fine.
The Bible's been
Whatever you
accused
want.
of being an outdated book of superstition, written by people who didn't understand the scientific workings of the real world. Now, this accusation is patently false. Not
Pause.
only does the Bible not contain
Paused.
Hey, Spooky Bad Hair. What's up, bro? I don't think you've joined us before, but nice to meet you, man. So the first sentence he's saying, I think is already false, right? He was like, a lot of people accuse the Bible of being full of superstition and written by people who don't understand the science. And that's just patently false. I mean, I think you can just read the first chapter in the Bible and figure that out, right? It makes really simple mistakes. It says that the moon is a light. That's not true, right? I think we can all agree that the moon isn't something that glows. And like there's a number of ways that you could figure this out. Like, matter of fact, if the moon was a light, it'd be a full moon all the time. The fact that the moon doesn't, the fact that you have different phases of the moon is the kind of proves that it doesn't glow. But so yes, it's full of superstition. It's full of blood magic. If you're familiar with the Exodus story, when it was this demon that was going around, the angel of death or whatever, it was killing all the firstborn, and you throw some blood on your door, and then it protects you from the angel, right? That's blood magic. The idea of sacrifice. I mean, this is all superstitious stuff. If a woman cheated on her husband, he could take her to the temple and be forced to drink this concoction, and it would only poison her if she was actually unfaithful. That is some superstitious-ish. So, but go ahead.
errors and superstitious statements, but it contains amazing scientific facts that were written down thousands of years before we in modern scientific times understood how important they were. I'm going to give you a list of 6.
I just
That is real name,
Super-
Kyle Butt with a B-U-T-T.
yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure if Phantom's joking or not.
No, I think this is his real name. I've seen it before somewhere.
Really?
Yeah, but more importantly, there is a passage in the Bible. I don't recall exactly where it's at this point, and I will look it up. at some point. But there's a passage in the Bible that talks about how if you want a striped horse, you have the male and female mate in front of a painted fence.
Yeah, then there were goats.
Yeah, something like that. I'm just like,
Yeah.
you mean this isn't superstitious? Alright, cool. Well, there's also witches and curses and blood pacts and blood magic and all sorts of stuff that's in the Bible. In fact, there's magicians like Exodus when before the Exodus of the people of Israel. You have Moses and his brother Aaron going against the Pharaoh, who throws down their staff and turns it into a snake. You know, like there's undoubted like magic and superstition in this book. And I don't think any of the authors would have ever claimed to be scientists compared to something modern.
6 scientific facts that validate the Bible. Number 1, blood being the liquid of life. In the 21st century, we understand how important blood is. We have studied it and seen its capabilities and its importance to life. But that knowledge was not well known in the past. In fact, in
Can
the
you pause
past,
it?
ignorance of just how important blood is.
So like even at the passage where when he talks about blood, it says life is in the blood or something like that. What's the exact passage? I should have looked it up.
Leviticus is, I think it's Leviticus 17. It says the life of the flesh is in the blood.
In the blood. So I wonder what does that even mean? Because so we understand how blood works now, right? It takes it's the main carrier of oxygen, right, from your lungs to your organs and your muscles, and that's how they work. And the Bible doesn't say anything like that. It says the life of the flesh is in the blood. And so the most I can think of this, the most I can say about this passage is that it's essentially saying that without your blood, you won't live. I feel like that's something that anybody can figure it out. Like even in a worst case scenario, like you're a Neanderthal, pre-civilization, living in a cave, hunter-gathering society. I think you could figure out that things that if you bleed excessively, you could die. And especially if you're in an advanced society like ancient Egypt, Persia,
China.
ancient kingdoms like China, India, Mayans, Aztecs, etc. I mean, dude, the Egyptians were literally doing brain surgery. And you don't think they made some sort of connection between blood and being alive?
Yeah, I'd
I don't
actually go a step
know. It's
further
just
because
bizarre.
I think I have some interesting context to allow for here, and I can't say with certainty, but I'd love to meet I'd love to have like an Old Testament expert scholar discuss this. I'd almost wager that the reason this passage in Leviticus exists has nothing to do with being about blood as far as what its purpose in life is or whatever this guy's trying to advocate it for, but instead because it's a Levitical law that we're talking about like the laws for the Levites. Instead it's actually talking about cooking practices, because you're not supposed to consume blood if you're a Jew. So we know for sure that like when you cook meat, you get hemoglobin, not necessarily blood, but you get red liquid coming out of meat that has been drained of blood.
Mhm.
And I'd be willing to bet that this has something to do with their cooking practices, because that would make a lot more sense when you're talking about Levitical laws and not consuming, like you're not supposed to consume live flesh.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to consume living things. You're not supposed to consume blood. And by cooking things to the point where there's no more blood or hemoglobin coming out of whatever you're cooking, you can mostly be sure that you've eradicated potential germs from it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the context now that I'm reading it, it kind of makes sense. Like the verse prior to it says, "I will set my face against any Israelite or foreigner residing among them who eats blood, and I will cut them off from the people."
Yeah.
So
So when you read it in context, like we get, I
yeah,
almost wager it's about cooking.
yeah.
Can't prove it, but
And then right after it says, "You if you when you eat an animal, you'll have to drain the blood first."
yeah, you see, like we know, like we even knew back then that like you drain blood from animals, and like I again, you're not supposed to consume blood because they thought it was like, and kind of rightfully so, the life of the flesh, like what makes something alive, like tissue will die without blood being present. And so
Yeah.
they also didn't really, like, we'll get into it here in a moment, but they didn't really understand germ theory, which is something he's going to talk to on a minute. But like we talk about the concept of like germ theory and like the fact that unproperly cooked meat can carry diseases, which is not something the Jews were really aware about, but we'll get to that in a moment. But the reason they would cook until there's no more blood left is just because that's what they thought was killing the germs or carrying the germs, which isn't really the case. But anyway.
Has caused some learned men to do some very tragic things. Up until the 19th century, doctors believed that harmful vapors entered the blood and caused sickness. For this reason, those doctors would literally bleed their patients by putting leeches on them or cutting the veins and arteries in the elbows
Can you
and
pause
getting
it?
that blood out. The first president.
So like that to me, that last part he says they thought that you could inhale fumes and it would make you sick. To me, that shows a like some primitive understanding that there's a connection between life and blood. Like they think that there's something in your blood and that's making you sick. So I mean, there that understanding, like it's primitive, it's basic, and it's lacking, you know, like all the complete details. But to me, if you think that, if you think there's something happening with your blood and that's making you sick, that shows some understanding, some connection that the blood is essential to your survival. So I think he's kind of undercutting his own argument here.
Yeah, also, like, bloodletting, I mean, it was widespread enough that we have plenty of documentation on it, but, like, the leeches thing is actually pretty interesting because, well, there aren't any big enough leeches to drain you so much blood
Yeah, I
you
know.
would
I'm
that you
gonna
would
say,
die.
like, how many leeches?
But I will say that like
Like,
there's some evidence in support of the fact that if you use leeches, they can actually remove some of the toxins that are in your blood. Because there are bloodborne diseases, there are also bloodborne toxins. So there's a little bit of science behind that. But I mean, like, this is kind of going to be my theme for the whole video, so I'll just kind of get it out of the way now. Uh, Even if everything this guy says is 100% true, what we're missing and what he's missing or what I think is missing is that if there is some divine inspiration for scripture, you would think that they provided better explanation than nothing or more in-depth explanation or like, I mean, knowing literally anything that we know in modern medicine comparatively. Like, you're gonna see him straight up lie about some germ theory stuff, but you're also gonna see, like, the Bible really doesn't talk about, like, how the fact that blood is made of platelets, and those platelets are cells, and those cells help fight germs and diseases when they're white blood cells, or they're formed within inside of bones, or, like, any of these other things that we know about, like, blood today. Like, to me, if you're divinely inspiring a book, or if you're dictating this book and you know everything and you want these people to live a full healthy life, it might be helpful for them to know some of these things, like, I don't know, like letting too much blood out is a bad thing, or that blood can carry diseases. Like, you know, that's but we don't get that. So that's my main criticism kind of throughout the whole video.
President of the United States of America, George Washington, came down with a cold, and his doctor was called, and he literally bled him to death. So what's that have to do with the Bible? Well, thousands of years before this lethal practice of bloodletting was in vogue, the Bible stated in Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood." And just a few verses down, it said that an animal's blood sustains its life. Today, we
Can
completely
you pause it
understand
real
the
quick?
truthfulness of this biblical.
What's interesting is that if like some of the societies he was talking about doing some of the bloodletting, like for instance, George Washington, right? So this is like colonial America. This is a society that is extremely Christian. If this was actually giving, real scientific information, like how did all these people miss it? And you'll see that throughout the video, right? He'll talk about some of the practices of England and other parts of Europe that were extremely Christian. And it makes you wonder, like, if this was actually to if this was actually giving scientific information to people, why didn't anybody realize that? Why is it that only after the fact that we discover these things scientifically are you looking back at the passage and say, oh, look, see, it's predicting this, you know? But, yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Statement. But how did an ancient shepherd like Moses in 1450 BC know that the life of the flesh is in the blood? It took the modern scientific medical community thousands of years and thousands of lives to discover this truth. Scientific fact number 2, sanitation practices. Some of the worst plagues in modern...
I want to be very clear going into this one. The dude's going to straight up lie about what the Bible says.
Times have been caused by improper sanitation practices. In 1846, the city of London had a terrible cholera epidemic. 16,000 people had been killed. Well, why could the doctors of the day do nothing to combat this deadly disease? You see, the city of London had a serious problem with sewage. The streets were filled with raw sewage that people would literally open their second and third story windows and dump into the streets. Now, as we know in our modern scientific era, raw sewage carries disease and causes all types of medical problems. If the people in London in 1846 had turned their Bibles to Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 12, they would have read this. Also, you shall have a place outside the camp where you may go out, and you shall have an implement among your equipment. And when you sit down outside, you shall dig with it and turn and cover your refuse. 3,300 years before London's epidemic.
So, like when I was going through this video for the first time, like whenever he pull up, when he would say stuff like this, oh, like we didn't find this out until thousands of years later. I just kept looking to see what ancient Egypt's practices were, and they were pretty damn sanitary, and so they separated their waste, from other stuff. Like I'm not sure what their understanding of the germs that they could carry and all that kind of stuff, but I mean, just a little common sense. I mean, you can look at it like a bowl of shit. And you're not going to want that near you. You're not going to want that near your food, near your stuff. You're not going to want to play around it. You're not going to want your kids around it. So it seems like to me, he just thinks that, I guess the ancients were stupid. That, if it wasn't for the Bible, people would be sitting around, taking shits on the same tables that they prepare their food. So, I mean, I don't know, man.
Yeah, I mean, we have civilizations with running water at this time.
Yeah.
Like, the Egyptians had plumbing at this point in history. We know that, like, there are practices to help keep things more sanitary. And to like assume otherwise. By the way, this was not the one I was thinking it was. There's one that he's going to come up and he's going to talk about washing your hands. That's the one I was
Oh
thinking
yeah.
about. Yeah, sorry. So just to clarify, but yeah, I mean, like, honestly, like the over and over again, like he just seems to think that like the Bible is some like book of giant wizardry. I mean, like, why not say like, here's how you make running water so you can get like, you know, get rid of it in a sanitized way, or like build a sewage system or a septic tank or anything like that. Like the Bible doesn't do any of this. It says dig a hole. And honestly, that's not even necessarily a great way to go about this, because
Yeah.
this causes like worms, especially for
Right.
people
That's
that are traveling over. Like,
especially if you live in like elevated territory, you know, like you don't want to bury your shit uphill, right? You don't want to put the outhouse out here and your food down here, because like, especially like you never put your, what was it? You make sure the well is uphill from the outhouse, which is important. All right, that's not so. Even the Bible's instructions there aren't very good.
The Bible had implemented a plan to stop such epidemics before they started. Amazing.
and yet there were many epidemics recorded in the Bible over and over
Yes,
again. Do people
by
die of
people.
epidemics?
Yeah, by people with access to the Bible.
Yeah, I mean, there are epidemics in the Bible of sicknesses coming on and killing a bunch of people.
Right, right.
Like, the scientific consensus today is that chances are some of these diseases that he's talking about, the Bible just, oh, if you just listen to it, would have got wrong. That some of the largest epidemics, like, recorded in the Bible are because of these diseases that they supposedly were preventing.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing scientific fact number 3, an understanding of germs. In 1847, about 18% of women who went into a modern medical facility to give birth would die. That's 1 out of every 6. Well, why was the death rate so high? The medical professors and the students, before that they would give the treatments to the live women, they would do autopsies on dead women. And then they would not wash their hands properly. They would many times wash them in a bowl with no germ-killing agent whatsoever, dry them on a dirty towel, and then perform those examinations on live women. Well, if you're looking at that from a 21st century observer's point of view, you realize that's terrible. They're passing germs from the dead bodies of ladies who are dying and giving those germs to the live women because they're not washing their hands. But to Europeans in the middle of the 19th century, that idea of passing a germ was a completely foreign idea to them. When the doctors and medical students implemented hand washing procedures, the death rate plummeted from 18% to about 2%. These doctors in the mid-1800s had made an amazing discovery, or had they? Is it possible that the doctors simply rediscovered something that had already been known? Well, almost 3,500 years before the 1850s, the Bible stated, "He who touches the dead body of anyone shall be unclean 7 days. He shall purify himself with the water on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day, then he will be clean. But if he does not purify himself on..."
So, I mean, right here, and this seems to be more religious oriented than actually related to sanitation. Like he says, like you touch a dead body, you're to be unclean for 7 days. And we know that has the amount of time between the amount of time after touching a dead body has no effect on how clean you are. So, I mean, like even here, even though it's the verse is about cleanliness, it doesn't give you any useful information. Saying to quarantine yourself for 7 days or something like that, just because you touch something. That's like, what are you gonna do with that? Because like you could use a tool on something with a bunch of diseases on it, wait 7 days, and then if you use it again, you're still going to infect the next person. It doesn't tell you anything about sanitizing shit. So, but go ahead.
On the third day and on the seventh day, he will not be clean. You'll find that in Numbers chapter 19, verses 11 and 12.
That's some really, really shitty sanitation practices. If you just for anyone who may not know, if you're out there touching dead bodies and you only wash yourself every 4 days, yeah, you doing it wrong. Just free life advice.
You see, the Israelites were instructed to wash their hands in water with germ-killing agent in it.
But where?
Yeah, I was like, where's that
Here's
in
the verse.
the Bible?
Here's the verse.
Well,
I backed it up.
yeah.
It's on the screen. Here it is. You see it? You see all the germ-killing agents that we see in this verse? You see the mention of germs in the verse? You see the mention of, like, antibacterial properties that they threw in here because it's an all-knowing God who knows everything? You see it. You see it all in this verse, right? Water. Third day. Seventh day. So you touch a dead body. 3 days later, you wash your hands with water. 4 days after that, you wash your hands with water again. Those are some excellent sanitation practices. You want to talk about killing people because of germs? Wash your hands every 4 days and perform some surgery or childbirth.
Right. You just won't be able to kill as many people because you have to wait, 4 to 7 days
you have to
in
wait
between.
4 to 7 days between washes, yeah.
Right.
11 and 12. You see, the Israelites were instructed to wash their hands in water with germ-killing agent in it 3,500 years before, in modern medical times, we knew that should be done.
Fun fact.
Lies.
Fun fact also. The real decline of childbirth or death in childbirth didn't come until the 1900s because of antibiotics. It had nothing to do with hand washing. Well, I mean, we did see a decline with good hand washing practices, but yeah, I guess it's Kyle using the Bible code version of the Bible. Yeah,
That's what I was laughing at.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be because it's not in the text, the Bible code version. Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
Amazing scientific fact, number 4. Ship engineering. While you don't go to the Bible for blueprints for a huge barge, you don't think, it just so happens that maybe that is where you go. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 15, the Bible says that a man by the name of Noah builds an ark that's 300 cubits long by 50 cubits wide by 30 cubits high. And it just so happens this is a ratio of 30 to 5 to 3, length to breadth to height.
I have no clue why he puts the ratio this way. Like, it bugs the heck out of me. Like 10 to 1 or 6 to 1. Like, that's how you would put this. Like, not 30 to 5 to 3. It's not how you do ratios.
Well, for thousands of years, the ark was the largest floating ship on record. In 1844.
Well, I mean, I want to be
He
clear.
says the
It's
largest
not on
floating
record.
ship on record.
Yeah, it's not on record.
Yeah, what record?
Just pointing it out there.
Also, I want to add that the ark, the way it's described in the Bible, it is not a ship or it's not a boat. It is a ark. Like, it is literally a facility that floats, but you can't guide it anywhere. Like, there was no sails on it. There's no motor inside. So like you get inside of it and you just float wherever until the water fades away. That's literally it.
A man named Isambard K. Brunel built a huge ship called the Great Britain, and he used a similar ratio to that of the ark, 30 to 5 to 3. As it turns out, that 30 to 5 to 3 length to breadth to height ratio is the perfect ratio to build a huge boat that doesn't need to go anywhere very quickly, but needs to stay afloat and carry tons and tons of supplies. That same ratio, 30 to 5 to 3, was used by shipbuilders in World War II when they built ships called Liberty ships that were designed to carry tremendous amounts of cargo.
You pause it.
Brunel and those.
I couldn't find many sources that said that Liberty ship. Well, I couldn't find any sources that said Liberty ships were based off of Noah's Ark, other than apologetics Christian websites. But I mean, I'm not saying this is a lie. I'm saying I just couldn't find any reference for it. But they've done a few models of Noah's Ark, and just the material that it was made of. Like there's no way this thing would float for any significant amount of time. That's just the type of wood that it was. It just wouldn't work. It was way too large, made of wood, and it would twist a bunch of different ways. This way, this way, this way, and most importantly, this way. It would do this, which is like most damaging.
Yeah.
As far as like letting water in.
There's a scientific word for the experience that you would have if you were on a wooden vessel of such length. It's called torsion, and that word is where we get the word tear. But that twisting motion that he was doing, this motion like this, is imagine the whole front of the ship getting hit by something one way, and the whole back of the ship turning this way. And that's what would happen. And the problem is, no matter how you put wood together, it's not intended to twist like this, right? Like, it's just, like, especially gopher wood, which is what's supposed to be used in the Ark, right? But, like, even the most flexible of woods, even if it were really flexible, what would happen when these things twisted is that it would come apart at the seams. You'd have holes in the Ark so big at the torsion effect caused by the water that it would literally twist itself apart. If it didn't completely come apart, it would have so many giant holes in it that it never would float. Also, yeah, because ancient people knew how to build boats, God.
Yes, that proves it.
Also true.
Yep.
Those engineers that were building those Liberty ships, they had generations of shipbuilding knowledge. But Noah's was literally the first of its kind. Where did he get that kind of information? Well, I would suggest from the master shipbuilder. Amazing fact.
Fun fact, God never once built another boat. Just throwing it out there. The master shipbuilder only built one.
Mm-hmm.
Number 5, quarantine. You see, in today's world of advanced medicine and understanding of germs, the idea of quarantining sick patients and separating them from those who are well, it's standard practice. But it certainly wasn't in the ancient world, because they didn't understand germs till about 200 years ago, and they didn't see a need to keep sick people separate from people who were not sick. The Bible, however, thousands of years before modern medical science understood the spread of germs, detailed measures to prevent their spread. In the book of Leviticus, we read that people with diseases such as leprosy were instructed to dwell alone outside the camp. We read that in Leviticus 13:46. And if and when an individual got close to somebody who is not diseased, this diseased individual was told to cover his mustache or upper lip and cry, "Unclean." Why? Why do we tell our children to cover their mouths when they cough? Well, to keep that diseased spittle from going into the air and from infecting others airborne. When we look at these instructions in Leviticus, and we see that Leviticus had an understanding of contagion and quarantine that surpasses that of any other nation, it's interesting that the Encyclopedia of Medical History says this: the idea of contagion was foreign to the classic medical tradition and found no place in the voluminous Hippocratic writings. The Old Testament, however, is a rich source for contagionist sentiment, especially in regard to leprosy and venereal disease. Now, here again, the Old
I'm not saying it's a good website. I'm just saying the Bible Truth website talks
Mm-hmm.
about that exact verse where you say you cover your mouth and say unclean. It's because you mourned people by having facial hair, and by covering your facial hair, it was a sign of sorrow and mourning. That's according to the Bible Truth website. Now, I don't know. I'm not a scholar of any kind. I don't know anything. But germ theory and being around lepers, just a bad idea because leprosy is incredibly contagious. And in fact, we have really bad quarantining happening and not happening as late as the New Testament, which is why I think it's hilarious that he says, at least in the Old Testament. Like, did the New Testament people forget? Is that a thing? Did they just not do this in the New Testament? Because I'll have you recall the story of Naaman in the New Testament, which is, or sorry, whatever his name is, the guy that's got told to go dip in the Jordan River 7 times. I think his name is Naaman. But he says go and told to dip in the Jordan River 7 times. And my question is, like, why would you send someone with leprosy to a place of bathing with a bunch of other people? Like, why not quarantine this person? Maybe have someone transport water to them so they could bathe. That kind of stuff. You remember, like, and you may not necessarily agree with it, but the restrictions we had when COVID was around, and like we weren't going out and hanging out in large groups because germs spread. Imagine leprosy, which causes the body to literally fall off, like body parts to fall off, and it can be spread by touch and by airborne. Like, imagine this, and we're just like, you know what? Nah, it's cool. Get together, go to that concert. It's fine. But when you're done, you got to go wash up. Like that.
Yeah.
Old Testament exhibits amazingly accurate medical knowledge that surpasses anything known that the humans who were alive at the time during the writers' lives could have possibly come up with on their own. Amazing scientific fact number 6.
Like, it's wild. He says that there's no way the human writers at the time could have possibly come up with this on their own. And I don't know. Like so when you're describing leprosy earlier, if I saw leprosy and then I noticed that people who touched the leper would also get it, I feel like I could come up with the idea of not touching that person and keeping him away from everybody else. I mean, maybe I might be overestimating my intelligence here.
I mean, we were aware of communicable diseases. What we weren't aware of until typhoid was non-symptomatic or asymptomatic communicable diseases.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that we didn't know about. But we did know about communicable diseases.
With this one, you can look at it. You can see you're infected with it.
Yeah.
I feel like, I mean, as a matter of fact, even with stuff that I know that isn't contagious, like somebody has like a severe burn in a sore, like you can't catch that, like from a burn. But like, I still don't want to touch that. I feel, I don't know. I feel like I could have come up with the idea of not getting near somebody like that. Just like I could have figured out on my own that bleeding can lead to death.
I'd also like to point out, like, even if this is the case for like leprosy and venereal diseases, which, like gonorrhea, so all of a sudden you got the burning sensation in your groin, or that kind of stuff. That the other thing I'd like everyone to just remember is, let's assume that's 100% correct. That means God also inspired people that came up with like modern germ theory, because these people definitely came up with it on their own. There was no Bible. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you know what? We looked through a microscope and we saw germs for the first time. That must have been the Bible. Well, no, these people came up with it on their own. You see what I'm saying? Like, they
Mhm.
weren't sitting there reading the Bible, getting inspiration, saying, like, I wonder, there's this odd passage about looking closely at something, and so I developed a microscope and therefore the germ theory of diseases. That's not what happened. These people came up with it on their own. They were doing scientific research and investigations based off of like hypotheses and theories. Like that's silly. They couldn't have come up with it on their own. Okay, well, I mean, by that logic, no one came up with anything on their own ever throughout all of history. Right? Like,
Right.
Galileo came up with the telescope on his own. No, he didn't. Couldn't have. That had to be divine. Divine inspiration.
Also, I was looking at the way it treats women who are on their menstrual cycle,
Mm.
and you can't catch that.
Yeah.
And
Blood.
it
Blood's
treats it in
involved.
very similar ways. Like she's unclean. Anything she sits on is going to be unclean. If you touch her, she's unclean.
It's blood.
Yeah, they must wash their hands whenever it's but it's not even saying the blood. It's just saying like just if you touch her.
I know, but like that's the
But
thing is
yeah,
that they're terrified of blood. Like blood magic
yeah.
is like all the rage in the Bible.
If a man has sexual relations with her and her monthly flow touches him, he will be unclean for. To me, this is odd addition. If a man has sexual relations with her and her monthly flow touches him, I mean, I guess not to get too graphic, but I mean, I've had sex uh while she uh while she was on her period a few times. I don't know how could you do that and not get blood on you? If a man has sexual relations with her and her monthly flow touches him.
I'd also like to point out that it's not just blood. There's also like mucus and other
Yeah,
liquids that are expelled through the vagina. Like there's a mucous membrane, which is the lining that comes from the uterus, and the egg itself, which is the blood.
yeah,
That's what we'd call the blood or the period itself. Like, but there's a membrane lining that gets shed as the monthly cycle happens. So there's like a liquid that's kind of a thick liquid, if you like, not to get gross, but like it's thicker, and then there's the actual egg itself, which is blood like. But like, are you just talking about the blood? Because that's the only part that you can kind of see and stain stuff. Because I bet so.
yeah.
Because it's a blood cult. Through and through, the Bible's a blood cult. Time and time again, don't eat things that have blood. Don't eat the flesh of things that
Yeah.
are bloody. Cook things until there's no blood left. Take and kill and sacrifice animals. Use their blood. Use the blood of the doorpost. Like, it's over and over. It's a blood cult. The Old Testament is a blood cult.
Spooky, he put the sick emoji face.
That's
I
like,
think it's to what I said. I say, hey, Spooky, man, don't knock it till you try it.
eat out more often.
Yeah.
Anyway. uh, yeah. Yeah, the Bible is just a blood cult. I'm just saying, like straight up,
Yeah.
over and over
Yeah.
again. Like
Hardcore. This is blood
like
magic.
literally, it like come to me and art. Like if there's any Christian that ever ends up watching this and you disagree that the Bible is not a blood cult, I'd like you to sincerely go through the Bible and look at the references to blood and the power of blood, if you will, throughout the biblical times, starting in literally Genesis 1. Start in Genesis 1.
Hebrews 9:22. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, blood is considered the atonement for man's sin. Blood. From day one, like in Genesis, starting where you have Cain and Abel. Like, we have Cain brings forth his flock and kills an animal. Like, that's one of the first things that ever happened. right? And Abel brings forth his fruit. So we have a blood sacrifice in the first few chapters from the first living humans ever. And then God kills animals to provide their skins to Adam and Eve to cover their shame.
Right.
And then animal sacrifice is a requirement going forward to God. We have animal sacrifice being forbidden in Genesis because he wasn't supposed to kill, and then it became a requirement not long after. And then no more animal sacrifice in, well, I mean, we have the Passover in Exodus. That's a pretty big blood thing. We have the don't eat the blood in Leviticus. We have the blood over the doorframe. And then we have the
How
water.
about King Solomon?
The water turning into
so,
blood.
So one time King Solomon, he for one sacrifice, he killed 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. Like, holy shit, bro. I mean, that is insane, bro. 120. You talk. So this is total 142,000 animals, bro. Oh my god, this is crazy.
Yep. But I mean, blood is like just us over and over again. Like it says, like by his blood, by the blood he shed, like, you know, like cleansed us of our sins. We have, you know, there's no forgiveness of sin without the shedding of blood. We have Jesus' blood as, you know, the covering for our sins, like over and over again. It's a blood cult. Just saying. The Bible's a blood cult.
Oh,
Food regulations. In the United States, we have the Food and Drug Administration. It's the FDA. And it's designed to make regulations.
I like how he sped up and he was like, this is the FDA. Throw it out there. Thank God. Didn't get it.
That keep people from getting sick from foodborne diseases.
Nah. Incorrect. That is not what the FDA does. Come back again.
Mostly. Knowing that certain kinds of food, such as pork, are more prone to carry disease, the FDA will make a regulation like this. You can go into a restaurant, you can order a beef steak that is rare. But if you go into that restaurant and you order a pork chop, you can't order it rare. Why? Well, because pork, if it's not cooked properly, has a much higher probability of causing some type of disease. We know that in modern times. But the Bible, especially the Old Testament, written some 3,000 years before modern times, exhibits a knowledge of food-borne diseases that surpasses anything that was around during the time of the writers. For instance, when you look in Leviticus chapter 11, it mentions that pork was not to be eaten. Well, that's a wise regulation, as we have seen. Even
wise regulation. Don't eat pork. But why not? Why do you think that's a wise regulation, good sir?
Right.
You just said, like, we have rules in place that if you cook pork properly, you reduce the risk to that of all other meat. Maybe have a regulation on how you should cook it.
And the modern FDA puts regulations in along
crazy. Just like in modernity, that's exactly what happened.
Those lines. The text also forbids the consumption of bats. You say, well, I don't want to eat a bat. Well, some people do. In fact, around the world, bats in some places are a delicacy. Why not eat bats? Just so happens that...
fun fact, I know it was a pangolin now, at least that's what we think it was, that started COVID. But prior to COVID, we thought it was a bat. It wasn't. It was a pangolin. So I thought this was mildly ironic.
Bats have a very high probability of carrying viruses that can be caught by humans, especially the rabies virus. Also, in Leviticus 11, we read that things like lizards, salamanders, amphibians are not to be eaten. Well, why? Well, lizards, salamanders, amphibians, etc., have about a 90% contamination rate of salmonella. Salmonella, a bacteria that causes many people to get violently sick and some of them to die. You see, the Bible never gets a single medical fact wrong.
Cool.
If it was actually stating medical facts, yeah, you might have an argument here. I mean, I'd argue that's not what it's doing. And then, I mean, the purpose of the laws, and it says it in the text, I gotta find an exact reference, but it was to set them apart. It's not to be clean or something like that. It was just to set Israel apart from other nations. Let's see if I can find it.
Hey, out of curiosity, I don't remember. I don't know how familiar you are with the Bible, but how are human females produced medically?
Human.
Yeah, medically.
So I get some. My understanding is that the woman donates a chromosome, and male donates a chromosome. The females is always X, and the males can be either X or Y. And so X, if it gives an X, is a female.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying like the joining of the egg and the sperm from independent donors that form will produce human life.
Yeah.
And that's medically accurate to your knowledge.
Yes, it is.
So you wouldn't say that you could remove a rib.
No.
All right, cool. Well,
Yeah.
medical fact
Medically
for ya.
accurate.
Women don't come from rib bones. I can guarantee you, in all of medical history, there has never once been a case in which a female woman that has been born was or that has lived in all of medical history that there's a record that she came from a rib bone.
I remember when I was younger, it was popular to believe, and I'm not sure if I believe this or not. I don't remember, but I know it was popular to believe that men actually had one less rib than women as a result of this. And like I know people that have said this recently. I've seen it on Facebook. It used to come from Christians, and it's kind of a weird thing to believe. I mean, despite all the magic surrounding the creation story, it's odd to think that just because Adam will lose a rib, that all of his children and thereafter will also lose a rib. Like imagine, like a man loses a finger, meets a woman, has a baby. Do you think that the baby is going to necessarily have 9 fingers because the father lost one? Like the reasoning was just kind of silly.
Yeah, I
to
mean,
me when
to
I
clarify,
saw it.
the answer is no. Men and women have the same number of ribs. In humans, it's 24. You have 12 pairs of ribs, 12 on each side. You also have things called false ribs. If you ever feel just underneath your rib cage, just kind of to the left or right of the solar plexus, that's called a false rib. It's cartilage. It's to help keep your organs in place. Those aren't real ribs. And you can break and lose some of that cartilage over time. In fact, women are more prone to lose that than men, but nothing to do with your ribs itself. They're called false ribs because they happen to be cartilage attached to the rib cage. But yeah, the answer is no. They don't have the different number of ribs. medically accurate, 24. So.
And it exhibits a knowledge of scientific facts that is thousands of years ahead of its time. That scientific accuracy proves the Bible's divine origin.
Scientific
I don't
accuracy.
think you know what the word
proves
"prove"
divine origin.
mean.
I don't
But
even think
I
it's
mean,
good evidence, much less prove.
it's not, and I don't know how I can't stress this hard enough. Just because even first of all, the Bible is not accurate on many things that it speaks on, but even if it were, that would not prove that it's divinely inspired. You can point out many textbooks, history books, science books, whatever, that may be 100% accurate in the things that they say. That doesn't mean it's divinely inspired. That doesn't follow. So obviously, if it had lies, then that probably would not come from a God that is omniscient or incapable of lying, which isn't the the Christian God, it would seem, because he seems to be neither omniscient and nor incapable of lying. But even if the Bible was 100% accurate, it doesn't prove divinity. Not even close. That's just not how logic works. It doesn't follow. So
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that we get a lot is when we talk about the diversity of life on this planet, something that some people seem to think is wrong for whatever reason, but evolution. Uh, that's something that we get over and over again. Like, we don't have like a medical or scientific definition of the word kinds. We seem to think that God created all of life as is, or the baseline for life, and then it evolved depending on where you stand on Christianity. Those are medical facts. They're just not medical facts pertaining to humans. Like, we're medical, just, refers to medicine, and you can apply medicine to things like animals. It happens all the time. But medical fact about animals, like, for instance, some pufferfish, they produce a poison which is mildly toxic, and dolphins use it to get high. That's a fun medical fact about animals. But you see how, it's not about humans, but the Bible still gets all of that wrong. Like, the Bible on evolution just doesn't, and evolution don't go hand in hand. So, another medical fact is that there is no whale, past, present, or future, capable of swallowing a human. Nor is it possible
really?
for a human.
Oh, the blue. Oh, that's right, because they got the filters in the soda.
Not only that, but their throat passage is about the size of a golf ball. Yeah, that's why they eat krill. They don't eat large things. The closest thing we've ever seen that's possible is a whale shark or a nurse shark, but most of them can't swallow a human. But also, like, a human medically can't survive in the belly of a whale for 3 days and 3 nights.
Well, Jonah had stomach acid proof skin.
Yeah, well, also, that's just not how the digestion tract works. Yeah. I mean, there's just some really interesting. Human hair, the length of it can decrease or increase your strength. Samson. The source of Samson's strength was his long hair. There's some good this is why both of us are weak as all get out, because we're both bald. You can barely lift a pencil, I'm sure, because we're bald. We barely get by. But Samson, because of his long hair, that was the source of his strength. Just saying, there's some medically stupid things in the Bible.
Yeah, also I'll get maybe innocent, but the way the Samson story reads, it reads like a myth. Samson would have to be remarkably stupid to fall for the trick that Delilah put him through. Like, remember, if first, he was asking, she asked, "Oh, what's the source of your strength?" And he said, "You gotta tie me up in rope." And he falls asleep, and somehow she managed to tie him in rope. Maybe this dude must have been a heavy ass sleeper. Like, I like somebody to try to tie me up in rope and
while I'm asleep,
wake me up. Yeah. So he does. She does that. She's like, "Oh, hey Samson, the people are the Philistines are upon you." He wakes up, he breaks out of it, and Samson doesn't think that's suspicious at all. The Philistines run out, and she's like, "Oh, Samson, you tricked me." He's like, "Oh, you got to use new rope." And so then he falls asleep
by the way,
again.
Delilah tells him that he was tricked by her.
Yeah.
Like, you
he
lied to
go fall
me.
asleep again.
Like, what do you mean you lied to me? Oh, well, you said if you were bound with rope.
Right, right. So
And then he
it was
clarifies.
new rope, but because she used old rope, so new rope, and he wakes up and he's bound the new rope, and then she's like, "Philistines are upon you," and then he breaks out of it, and then she's like, "Oh, you lied to me." He's like, "Oh, you gotta braid my hair," and so then he falls asleep again, and I don't know if you've ever like had your hair braided or seen someone braid it. It takes a long time. My wife gets her hair when she gets her hair braided. It takes like the whole fucking day. But yeah, anyway, he goes to sleep and his hair is like braided or in locks or whatever. And he wakes up in the same story again, and he finally tells her that it's to cut his hair. Like it's just a bizarre. Like Samson would have to be an idiot to not know what's going on. I don't know, man. He got to be the dumbest character in the Bible. I have such a problem with him. But
Yeah. Pretty big dumb.
but yeah. Next week, I'm just looking to. There's a guess I'm trying to get if we can work out something. So if not, I will probably be responding to another video. But we'll see how well this one does. We've had a few response videos that like did pretty well, like over 1,000. But
I don't
he
know if
said
this is accurate. But
Samson is a bit dense. Go ahead.
yeah, I don't know if this is accurate, but I was just reading this article about like medical facts in the Bible, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that this is incorrect. There might be passages, so don't quote me on this. I'm quoting an article. It says the Old Testament doesn't include a single reference to a doctor or medicine healing the sick. Like if I'm not mistaken, the first like idea of a doctor existing in the Bible is in the New Testament with Luke, right? Like that would be the first time that we mention a doctor.
Yeah.
And like there
But
may
I don't
be
know if they're giving them medicine and healing them and being treated by it. I don't recall.
Yeah, I can't think of anything right offhand. I don't want to say it's like 100% accurate, but that's a pretty interesting thing. Just to
Do you see Phantom's comment? He said once a month we should do a open panel.
we can do that.
I'm
I
down
mean,
for
we
that.
have
Like
that
I guess
budget.
like kind of like what we did like a few weeks ago or a few months ago when we did had open stream. We're gonna put a few more precautions because I don't know if you remember last time somebody trolled the shit out of us, dude. They came in and then they started they casted the live stream and it confused the shit out of me. It was annoying. But yeah. Well, I'll be down to do that. Next time we'll have some more checks on it. Let's do like I don't know, maybe aim for like the beginning of next month or something like that if we don't have a guest.
Yeah. Well, anything else?
Nah, I'm good, man. Guys, thanks for tuning in. It's Phantom, Dan, Spooky. Sorry if I grossed you out earlier. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. And we will see y'all next week. We'll be streaming next week. I'm pretty confident, whether we have a guest or not. So
Hopefully, audio issues are kind of fixed now. Our audio was fine the whole time. Getting the video to work was a pain in the butt, but now that that's fixed, it tends to fix itself for a while as long as we keep using the software. When we don't, things get disconnected, and I have to figure out where the disco is. But nonetheless, they're back fixed now. So if we want to do something else like this, we can do it again.